Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's now 9:30 a.m., so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the public workshop for DTSC's Microplastics in Consumer Products Research. My name is Danielle Gilstrap, and I serve as a public participation specialist with the Office of Environmental Equity at the Department of Toxic Substances Control, which we're going to refer to as DTSC throughout the workshop today. This workshop is being recorded, and by joining, you agree to be recorded. The workshop is scheduled from 9:30 a.m. to 12 noon. However, if we are able to answer all questions and collect all public comments prior to 12 p.m., we may end early. If we reach the end of the workshop and we're unable to get to all of the questions and comments, please email your questions and comments to saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. We're going to put that email address into the chat box for you. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's workshop is to summarize DTSC's preliminary screening research of microplastics in consumer products and which types of products we looked into, and to collect your feedback. We have a dedicated webpage for microplastics in consumer products where you can find the background document, FAQs, event materials, and instructions on how to submit comments. We'll drop that link into the chat for you. To clarify, this workshop is not going to focus on adding microplastics to DTSC's candidate chemicals list rulemaking. If you have questions on adding microplastics to DTSC's candidate chemicals list rulemaking, please see the rulemaking website. We'll add that link into the chat. Following the presentation, we will take questions and comments from the audience. Please note the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of this workshop will be available for review at DTSC's Safer Consumer Products webpage at https://dtsc.ca.gov/SCP/Safer Consumer Products Workshops Events /. We've also added that link to the chat for you. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to briefly go over the logistics for today's workshop. You're in a listen and participation role. Automatic closed captions have been turned on. If you would like to follow along with the closed captions, please click on the CC button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please note we will not be taking questions through the chat feature today. We'll only be using the chat for sharing helpful links and information. Today we will be taking questions through the Q&A feature and raised hands. Please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. You may submit your questions and comments throughout the workshop. We'll respond to your questions during the Q&A session and read and review comments during the public comment session following the presentation. During the Q&A portion, you can send us as many questions as you want. However, we do ask that you send us one question at a time so that we can respond to each one thoroughly. Additionally, we'll be taking questions via raised hands. Please wait until the end of the presentation to raise your hand. We'll do our best to respond to questions in the order that they are received. For anyone who's joining us by phone today, you'll be able to press *9 on your phone to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. And once we call on you, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. Following our Q&A session, we'll have our public comment session. Please note, our panelists will only be responding to questions during the Q&A portion of the workshop. The public comment session is reserved specifically for gathering any comments regarding DTSC's preliminary screening research on microplastics in consumer products. Similar to the structure of the Q&A session, we will be taking public comments via the Q&A feature and raised hands. Since we do have a large number of people joining us in the workshop today, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Lastly, please note that we are hosting this workshop virtually, and we ask that you bear with us if there are any time lags, longer pauses, or technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience and understanding in making this a successful workshop today. Next slide, please. This is our agenda for today's workshop. We'll start with opening remarks, then we'll provide an overview on the Safer Consumer Products program. Next, we'll give an overview of microplastics. At this point, we'll pause for a short break. Then, we'll present DTSC's preliminary screening research on microplastics in consumer products. Since we are sharing a lot of information today, and we estimate about 45 minutes for the presentation, we will have another 5-minute break to give everyone time to collect their thoughts before we begin the Q&A session. During the Q&A session, it will be your opportunity to ask questions for the panel to address today. After the Q&A session will be the public comment session. Please note, the panel will not be responding to comments received. However, we will compile, review, and consider comments when finalizing the preliminary document. And finally, we'll conclude with closing remarks. Next slide, please. Currently, the public comment period is open. The public comment period began on November 14th, 2025, and closes at 11:59 p.m. on January 30th, 2026. 2 QR codes are available on the slide shown here. The QR code to the left can be used to access the background document on microplastics in consumer products. The QR code to the right can be used to submit public comments on the CalSafer website. Again, please submit your comments no later than 11:59 p.m. on January 30th, 2026. I would just like to say a quick thank you to all of our panelists for your time and dedication in being here today. And without further ado, please welcome Deputy Director Robin Christensen. Over to you, Robin.
Morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Danielle, for the introduction. My name is Robin Christensen. I'm the Deputy Director for the Safer Consumer Products Program, which is also known as the SCP program. One of my key priorities here is early engagement to inform our science and regulatory actions, which is why I am so happy to see so many webinar participants here today with us. Thank you for joining us and engaging with us on this issue. If you've been following along with our work or subscribed to our listserv, you may know that we've initiated rulemaking on our proposal to add microplastics to the SCP candidate chemicals list. This took place in June of last year, but our work on microplastics dates back several years now. Notably, the SCP program joined a coalition of state agencies supporting the California Ocean Protection Council on the development of the statewide microplastics strategy, which was released in 2022. And our current priority product work plan, released in 2024, also highlights our ongoing efforts to conduct research into products that contain or may generate microplastics. Now, this work has been motivated by increasing evidence of human and wildlife exposures to microplastics, as well as emerging information about the potential toxicity of microplastics. Last month, we reached another milestone when we released a background document summarizing our preliminary research findings. For those of you who have been engaged with our program over the years, you know that public workshops are a vital part of our engagement process to solicit information. So yes, we are here today to share our initial research, but most importantly, this is a call to action. We are specifically requesting information from you to help inform our next steps. Alice will cover our process in more detail, but I want to emphasize that today is really the start of our early engagement with interested parties. Over the next couple years, we aim to continue this research process and begin to prioritize specific product-chemical combinations that may advance to rulemaking. As a science-driven regulatory program, it is crucial that we gather your input so that we can learn from you and that we can leverage your data and information to help us fill in gaps in the research. Your input is very important to us as we continue to refine our research and potentially propose one or more products containing or generating microplastics as priority products under the SCP regulations. Now, later on today, members of our team will present an overview of our framework to illustrate how the program works, followed by a summary of our preliminary research and what we've learned about the potential for microplastics in consumer products to cause or contribute to adverse impacts on humans, on wildlife, and on the environment. We will also discuss the next steps in our process and how you can get involved. So I want to thank you again for joining today's virtual public workshop. We look forward to hearing your comments after all the presentations. . And now I'd like to turn it over to Alice, who will describe the SCP framework.
Thank you for the introduction, Robin. Hi, everyone. My name is Alice Henderson, and I'm an environmental scientist here at the Safer Consumer Products program within DTSC. Today, I'll share a broad overview of how our program decides which products we regulate. So, our program's mission is advancing the design, development, and use of products that are chemically safer for people and the environment. And we regulate consumer products that are sold, distributed, or manufactured in California. However, I do want to mention there are certain products that do not fall within the jurisdiction of our program. In particular, these are pesticides, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and food. And we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So this next slide shows the four-step process described within California's Safer Consumer Products regulation. We'll go ahead and share a link in chat to our program's website in case you'd like more details. There's also a link there at the bottom of the slide. Our process starts up at the top there in orange with our candidate chemicals list. This is the list that defines the chemicals and the chemical classes that we can regulate. These are identified by certain authoritative bodies, including the California Department of Public Health and the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. We here at DTSC can also propose additions to that list, which is the case for microplastics. My coworkers will be describing that proposal a little bit in the next sections of our workshop, although as we've mentioned, it's not the focus of our workshop today. So the next step of our process, highlighted in blue, is where we identify priority products for formal rulemaking. These are the specific product chemical combinations that our program determines may be causing harm. For example, once rulemaking is adopted to add microplastics to our candidate chemicals list, then our program has the authority to then prioritize specific products for regulation if they contain or generate microplastics. Once we prioritize a product chemical combination through a formal rulemaking process, this is step 3 shown in green, then requires manufacturers to evaluate alternatives to the chemical of concern in their product and decide whether there is a safer alternative. We refer to this as the alternatives analysis process. This is critical for preventing regrettable substitutions, a situation where a harmful chemical might be replaced by something equally or even more harmful if it's not really closely considered. So then, based on the alternatives analysis reports we receive from manufacturers, DTSC then selects appropriate regulatory responses to mitigate the harmful effects of the priority product. This is step 4 there in purple. Our regulatory responses can include banning products, but we can also require manufacturers to invest in scientific research to find safer alternatives, or we can enact additional product labeling requirements. The main idea here is that our goal is mitigating the harmful effects of the product, and we have a lot of flexibility in how exactly we go about doing that. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. So I want to highlight that today's workshop is very early in our process of prioritizing products to regulate that contain or generate microplastics. We have conducted some preliminary screening research and are currently seeking your engagement to inform our next steps. While this is the first opportunity for formal public comment on this work, there will be additional public comment periods well before we initiate rulemaking to regulate any specific products. To stay informed of our progress, you're welcome to sign up for our Safer Consumer Products e-list. You can also contact our program staff at any time with questions or feedback at our general inbox, and we'll go ahead and share both of those links in the chat now. Okay, we can go ahead and go one more slide here. So I've covered a lot here right off the bat, but if you only remember one detail about the SCP program's framework and our prioritization process, this is it. So when we're considering which product chemical combinations we might regulate, as we're doing now for products that contain or generate microplastics, we consider the two primary principles listed on this slide. The first is whether there are potential exposures to a candidate chemical in the product. And the second is whether those exposures have potential to contribute to significant or widespread adverse impacts. As long as our program can demonstrate a potential for exposure and adverse impact, then we can consider regulating a product. So next, my coworker Jemiah Belk will be sharing an overview of microplastics, including their hazard traits and exposure potential from consumer products, generally speaking.
Alrighty. Hello, my name is Jemiah Belk. I am a hazardous substances engineer leading some of the research on microplastics here at Safer Consumer Products program. Today, we'll be doing an overview of microplastics, their hazard traits, and exposure potential. Then we'll be looking at various consumer products that contain microplastics or have the potential to generate microplastics. Next slide, please. Now I will talk about DTSC's focus on microplastics and where we're at with our efforts regarding microplastics. It is important to note that there is no universally accepted definition of microplastics. Microplastics are generally plastics that are less than 5 millimeters in their longest dimension. Currently, microplastics are not on DTSC's candidate chemicals list. In 2025, we initiated a rulemaking to add microplastics to our CC list. You can find the details of this rulemaking in the link that will be shared in the chat. Next slide, please. Generally, microplastics are categorized as primary or secondary. Primary microplastics are intentionally manufactured as microplastics for specific products or applications. Examples of primary microplastics include microbeads in personal care products and nurdles, also known as pre-production pellets, which are the building blocks for production of various plastic products. Secondary microplastics form due to the fragmentation of larger plastics. Examples of secondary microplastics include tire wear particles and plastic bottle fragments. DTSC's proposed definition of microplastics includes both primary and secondary microplastics. Next slide, please. So, microplastics exhibit certain hazard traits. Almost all microplastics are persistent and mobile in the environment. Depending on the physical and chemical properties of microplastics, such as polymer type, particle size, or fiber dimension and shape, they can have additional hazard traits such as carcinogenicity, respiratory toxicity, and wildlife impairment. Please see the background document for references and additional information. Next slide, please. Microplastics have been detected in every ecosystem, including different sources of water, air, and soil, even in the food and beverages that humans consume. This conceptual model illustrates how microplastics are released to the environment during use and disposal of consumer products, with a focus on potential routes to humans and ecosystems. Microplastics are released from consumer products during use phase into air, water, soil, or food, depending on the product's use. In this model, the white lines show different routes of how microplastics can move throughout the environment. At the product end of life, plastic particles can either go down the drain into wastewater systems and to wastewater treatment plants or find their way into landfill. Given their persistence and mobility in environmental media, microplastics in landfills may leach back into the environment. Microplastics can also be transported through air, dust, wind, rain, runoff, wastewater effluent, and via leaching of biosolids. Next slide, please. As you have seen in the conceptual model, we are concerned about microplastics because they are persistent, mobile, and widespread in the environment. And microplastics can be consumed by humans and animals and uptaken by plants. In addition, they may have adverse health impacts on humans and other organisms. Next slide, please. There is potential for human exposure to microplastics. Microplastics can be inhaled from air, ingested from drinking water, food, and beverages. Dermal exposure to microplastics can also occur from contact with products containing microplastics and from household dust. Next slide, please. There's potential for humans to experience adverse impacts from being exposed to microplastics. However, health impacts from microplastics are currently being studied. Studies have shown that microplastics have been detected in human blood, lungs, placentas, testes, breast milk, and stool samples. Vulnerable populations exposed to microplastics include children, pregnant people, and workers. Next slide, please. There is also potential for environmental impacts and wildlife exposure to microplastics. As I mentioned in the exposure model, microplastics are detected in every ecosystem, air, water, and soil. Wildlife can mistake microplastics for food and feed on them. Microplastics can transfer through the food chain. Plants can also uptake microplastics from water and soil. Next slide, please. The images you see on this slide show that microplastics were detected in various aquatic species in lab studies. The upper left image illustrates the detected microplastics in copepod, shown as blue dots. The upper right image illustrates microplastics detected in perchfish, shown as round yellow particles. And the middle image illustrates microplastics detected in shrimp, shown as white areas. Under environmental conditions, it is expected that these aquatic organisms are likely to be exposed to a mixture of microplastics of different sizes, shapes, and colors. Next slide, please. Therefore, there is potential for adverse impacts to wildlife from exposure to microplastics. Organisms exposed to microplastics can experience physical stress and damage, changes in microbiota, inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune responses. I'm now going to turn it over to Danielle to let us know the next section of the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Jemiah. Before we continue with the rest of the presentation, we are going to pause here for a 5-minute break. When we return, our senior environmental scientist will present on our preliminary screening research on microplastics in consumer products. We do recommend keeping the Zoom meeting open while you're on break. Thank you, and we'll see you all back here in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. This concludes our first break. Our senior environmental scientist will now share our preliminary screening research on microplastics in consumer products. Fatima, over to you.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everyone. My name is Fatima Bamdad. I'm a senior environmental scientist leading part of the research on microplastics at Safer Consumer Products. This part of the workshop summarizes our preliminary research on microplastics in consumer products. For more information on the background document and related frequently asked questions, please visit the Microplastics in Consumer Products webpage. The link will be shared in the chat. Next slide, please. Our 2024 to 2026 priority product work plan listed a variety of product categories that we would be evaluating during that time period, including products that contain or generate microplastics. You can find the list of product categories in the priority product work plan in the link provided in chat. To begin our work on products that contain or generate microplastics, we consulted experts, conducted our own research, and reviewed the Ocean Protection Council's statewide microplastic strategy report to develop a large list of products for evaluation. Next slide, please. This slide shows that initial list of products. As you can see, it covers a wide range of product categories. Next slide, please. We then developed a strategy to narrow the initial product list. This strategy incorporated a number of considerations, including our findings from reviewing scientific literature, including the potential for exposure and adverse impact, product-specific technical information, and marketing data. We also considered discussion with interested parties and subject matter experts. Current feasibility for SCP, given the availability of our resources, and additional policy considerations. The outcome was a narrowed list of product categories. Next, please. Then we conducted additional research on this more narrowed list of product categories. This workshop summarizes our research findings on microplastics in certain categories of consumer products. Additionally, please see the link in the chat for product-specific topics for feedback in our background document. I should add an important note here that we may revisit the product categories that we haven't initially focused on at a later date. We would appreciate any additional information you may have on all product categories in the initial larger product list. Next slide, please. This slide shows the narrowed list of products evaluated by DTSC. In the following slides, I will provide more details on microplastics, exposure pathways, and some of the relevant regulations that cover each product category. Next slide. Thank you. So we start with artificial turf infill. Artificial turf infill is a primary microplastic that provides structure, support, and cushion to the artificial turf. It is sometimes mixed with larger plastic particles. During use, infill can also produce secondary microplastics. Users of artificial turf surfaces, especially children and athletes, interact with infill and can experience exposure from skin and eye contact via ingestion and through inhalation of infill dust. Also, because of loose nature of infill, it is known to escape from fields into the surrounding environment and expose wildlife and ecosystems. In 2023, the European Union passed a broad restriction on the sale and use of intentionally added microplastics in many products, including artificial turf infill. For infill, the regulation allows an 8-year transition period for all current fields containing microplastic infill to reach their end of life. Some examples of alternative products include infills made from sand, wood, cork, and walnuts. Next slide, please. Children's toys containing primary microplastics. This is a subset of children's toys we evaluated that contain intentionally added microplastics. This category includes toys that contain primary microplastics, such as polymer-coated toy sand, slime, putty, toy foam, and other polymer modeling materials. Glitter is also a common primary microplastic in many modeling materials. Plastic glitter or other primary microplastics can remain on hands after play. Children can be exposed to microplastics directly on their skin or through ingestion when they put their fingers and toys in their mouths. The European restriction that I mentioned in the previous slide also covered the intentionally added microplastics in toys, and in this case, they placed an immediate ban on loose glitter. Regarding alternatives, there are natural modeling materials made from renewable cork. Also, at-home recipes for play sand and slime are among potential alternatives. Cellulose and mica are some examples of potential alternatives to glitter. Next slide, please. Plastic film mulch is an agricultural product that helps control weeds, moderate soil temperature, and reduce water loss from the root zone. Farmers throughout the entire world use plastic film mulch extensively, including in California. Plastic film mulch is the biggest contributor to secondary microplastics in agricultural soil. Application and removal of plastic film mulch may expose farm workers to airborne microplastics. Additionally, crops can take up microplastics from the soil. Once in the food chain, the microplastics are then available for livestock and human consumption. In terms of regulations, there are limited regulations that address plastic film mulch and its associated microplastics in the US and around the world. The US Department of Agriculture, USDA, allows the use of conventional and biodegradable plastic film mulches with restrictive annotations for growing certified organic produce. However, no biodegradable plastic film mulches currently meet the USDA's criteria. There are many alternatives to plastic film mulch, including straw, bark, leaves, cardboard, and wool. Next slide, please. Single-use plastic cigarette filters are made of plastic polymers that can break down into microplastics at the product's end of life. Littered cigarette filters will get into receiving water bodies like rivers, lakes, and oceans through surface runoff and release microplastics and harmful chemicals. They will pose risks to terrestrial animals, aquatic life, and sensitive subpopulations, including children, through accidental ingestion or exposure at beaches and seashores. Filtered cigarettes are banned in Santa Cruz County, California, starting January 1st, 2027. In 2022, California proposed a regulation to ban single-use tobacco products, but this effort was unsuccessful. Some examples of alternative products are non-filtered cigarettes and filters made of charcoal. Next slide, please. Water-based interior wall paints. This category includes water-based interior wall paints that are widely used by consumers. Synthetic polymers are the source of microplastics in interior paints and primarily function as binders and sometimes as additives. Secondary microplastics can also be generated from dried paint layers through fragmentation, which may expose children, pregnant people, and indoor pets. Additionally, microplastics from paint can be inhaled from indoor air and household dust. Washing paint application tools down the drain and improper disposal of paint can contaminate water sources, and therefore humans and aquatic life can be exposed to microplastics from water via ingestion. Despite the substantial market and potential for microplastics exposure, there are no federal or state regulations that limit the use of microplastics in paints. Some examples of potential alternatives include mineral-based, clay-based, and lime-based paints. Next slide, please. The cleaning products category. This category includes fabric softeners, laundry detergents, and dishwashing detergents. In this category, we focused on microplastics released from 3 groups of polymers. The first group is intentionally added polymers used as opacifiers, emulsifiers, and anti-foaming agents. The second group includes fragrance microcapsules, which are small polymer capsules that release fragrance over time. And the third group is water-soluble polymers in detergent pods. The pods dissolve during the wash cycle, releasing the detergent and other ingredients. Next slide, please. Laundry and dishwashing detergents are widely used in households. This releases large quantities of microplastics to wastewater treatment plants, which cannot fully remove them. These microplastics are then released into waterways, where they persist in the environment and pose risks to ecosystems and human health. Human exposure to microplastics from cleaning products can occur through skin contact, ingestion, and inhalation, particularly affecting vulnerable populations such as children and pregnant people. In February 2025 in California, a proposed regulation was introduced to ban the sale of cleaning products containing plastic microbeads. However, this proposed regulation was unsuccessful. The European Union placed restrictions on intentionally added microplastics and fragrance microcapsules in household and industrial detergents and cleaning products as of September 2023. Also, a proposed regulation in New York City would prohibit the sale of laundry and dishwasher pods and sheets using polyvinyl alcohol from January 2026. There is a wide range of different alternatives depending on the functional use of the plastic ingredient. Some examples include plant-based emulsifiers, mineral opacifiers, and non-plastic rheology modifiers. Potential alternatives to fragrance microcapsules include biodegradable microcapsules. Next slide, please. Food contact articles are in close contact with food during production, processing, serving, or storage. Microplastics and other harmful chemicals can migrate into food and be ingested by consumers. So the main exposure route for all these products is ingestion. Further, many of these products can release microplastics into the environment at the end of life. Next slide, please. The first group of food contact articles is plastic beverage bottles and caps. Plastic beverage bottles and caps are made of plastic polymers that shed secondary microplastics into beverages during storage and from opening and closing bottles. In California, SB 54 was signed into law in 2022, which mandates producers to meet specific recyclability and compostability rates set by CalRecycle. This could result in reformulations of some products to meet these requirements. Currently, CalRecycle is revising this law. This law covers different food contact articles, so you will hear about it multiple times during this presentation. In Europe, single-use plastic packaging for food and beverages will be banned in cafes and restaurants effective January 2030. Potential alternatives include reusable glass, ceramic, aluminum, or stainless steel bottles. The next group is plastic wrappers for snacks and candy. These packages are composed of layers of various polymers and a metallized liner. Opening plastic wrappers sheds secondary microplastics that can contaminate food and expose humans to microplastics. There are currently no regulations that ban plastic snack wrappers, but the law enforced by CalRecycle applies to the plastic wrappers too. Plant-based compostable materials have been introduced as alternatives to these products. The next group is polystyrene foam foodware. This group includes takeout containers, beverage containers, plates, bowls, clamshells, and food trays. These containers are mostly made from expanded polystyrene. Because polystyrene foam is very porous, it is more prone to breakdown and shedding secondary microplastics compared to the other polymers, such as polyethylene and polypropylene. In California, also under SB 54, CalRecycle has restricted expanded polystyrene foam foodware in 2025 unless the recycling rates are met. Other than California, 11 states have currently enacted bans on polystyrene foam foodware. Also in the EU, the single-use plastic policy banned expanded polystyrene food and beverage containers and cups as of 2021. Currently, there are several alternatives on the market. Some examples are foodware made from potato starch, palm leaf, wood pulp, and bamboo. Next slide, please. Plastic baby feeding bottles. Both bottles and teats are made of plastic polymers. These are of particular concern because microplastics generated during shaking, opening and closing, cleaning, and sterilization of the baby bottles can be ingested by babies. There are no existing or proposed regulations on microplastics released from plastic baby bottles. Glass, stainless steel, or silicone bottles are some examples of available alternatives for baby feeding bottles. Plastic cling wraps and films. These wraps and films are used to preserve and increase the shelf life of food. These films are typically made from polyvinyl chloride, PVC, or low-density polyethylene. They generate secondary microplastics from cutting or heating, which contaminates food and exposes humans to microplastics. In 2024, California introduced a proposed regulation that would prohibit the use of plastic packaging containing PVC, including plastic cling wraps and films. However, this proposed regulation was unsuccessful. Outside of California, 5 additional states have proposed regulations restricting the use of PVC in packaging. Some examples of potential alternatives could be ceramic or glass containers for food storage. And the last group is plastic tea bags. Tea bags are often made of plastic. Even the tea bags that are made from natural fiber, like paper, are sometimes lined with a plastic layer to give them a heat-sealing property. During the tea brewing process, tea bags are placed in hot water, which releases microplastics and exposes humans to microplastics via ingestion. Plastic tea bags do not biodegrade at the end of life phase, so they also impact wildlife and the environment. There is no regulation on plastic tea bags in the United States. In France, the circular economy law banned non-biodegradable plastic tea or herbal tea bags from January 2022. Tea bags made of cotton and paper are some examples of potential alternatives. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in the previous slides, we are requesting information from interested parties about the potential exposure to microplastics from products and the resulting adverse impacts of this exposure. The goal is to understand the current use of microplastics, to identify and evaluate exposure potential and adverse impact, the availability of the alternatives, and alignment with other regulations. The core topics are: what are the alternatives to the conventional plastics that contain or generate microplastics? What data is available on the safety of alternatives? What are other concerns associated with these alternatives? For example, is there any evidence on the migration of harmful chemicals from alternatives? Or to what extent do they biodegrade in the environment? Are there any other hazard traits associated with these alternatives? Is industry going to reformulate products in the North American market when they comply with the EU regulations on microplastics? We also have product-specific topics for feedback on the products we have evaluated in the background document. Please see the link in the chat to review our additional topics. Next slide, please. The key takeaways for this workshop include: many consumer products contain or generate microplastics. Microplastics are persistent, mobile, and widespread in the environment. There is potential for human and wildlife exposure to microplastics released from various consumer products. Microplastics can pose adverse impacts on human, wildlife, and the environment. And there are ongoing research efforts to find safer alternatives. Next slide, please. DTSC is asking interested parties to provide feedback on specific topics listed in the background document. Written comments can be submitted via the online information management system, CalSafer. This workshop and the public comment period are focused on microplastics in consumer products, with the goal of soliciting information on data gaps, availability and feasibility of alternatives, and methods to reduce microplastics exposure and pollution. This external engagement process will help inform additional research that may result in the proposal of one or more priority products. Next slide, please. This concludes our presentation today. Special thanks to our presenters and the Microplastics team who worked hard to publish the background document and make this workshop possible. Also, special thanks to the many subject matter experts who assisted us during this process. Next slide, please. Thank you for joining us in today's presentation on microplastics in consumer products. If there is information that you would like to share with us, or you have any questions or comments, please contact the program at saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. The public comment period will be open until January 30th, 2026, which you may access through the CalSafer portal. Now I turn it over to Dania. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. Again, we want to thank our audience for staying engaged during this presentation. This concludes the presentation portion of the workshop. We're now going to take a brief 5-minute break. During the break, you can start sending us your questions by using the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll respond to your questions once we come back from the break. We recommend keeping the Zoom meeting open while you're on break. If you close the meeting, you will not be able to see the chat history or your questions when you rejoin. And with that, we'll see everyone back here in 5 minutes. Welcome back. Thank you for rejoining us. We will now begin the Q&A portion of this workshop. The Q&A portion is for clarifying questions about microplastics and our preliminary research. As a reminder, the Q&A portion of this workshop is not going to focus on adding microplastics to DTSC's candidate chemicals list rulemaking. If you have questions on adding microplastics to DTSC's candidate chemicals list rulemaking, please see the rulemaking website. We'll send that link in the chat for you. After the Q&A, we will have a separate time dedicated to public comments when we will collect and record all public comments for consideration on the proposal. We will not be addressing questions during the public comment period, but you can always send us additional questions that you think of to the SCP team via email at saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. As previously mentioned, if you would like to send us a question, please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can submit as many questions as you'd like. However, we ask that you submit them one at a time so we can respond to each one thoroughly. As a reminder, we will not be taking questions by the chat feature. And for those of you joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. And when we call on you, you'll be able to unmute yourself by pressing *6. Let's begin. Our first question comes from Laurentine Brazil, and it's, is packaging part of SCP regulations?
Hi there, this is Ann Cooper Doherty. I lead the Chemical Evaluation Unit with the Safer Consumer Products Program. And if you're referring to food packaging and really most any kind of packaging, that does fall within the regulatory scope of what we can regulate. So.
Thank you, Ann Cooper, for that answer, and thank you, Laurentine, for the question. Our next question comes from Serena Palmer, which is plastics. Oh, this is actually more of a comment, so we will save this for the public comment portion. Our next question comes from Laurentine Brazil. How long will it take to remove microplastics from every ecosystem if approved for addition to DTSC's chemical list?
Does anyone want to take this one? I jump in.
Go ahead, Andre.
I'm Andre Algazi. I lead the Chemical and Product Evaluation branch here in Safer Consumer Products. Obviously, once microplastics are released to the environment from whatever source, consumer products or others, it's very difficult to remove them. So really, I think what we can hope to accomplish by regulating these products is to stem the tide, to stop, additional releases of microplastics. And depending on the polymer and the environment, it can take, hundreds of years of half-life for microplastics to break down. So sadly, removing them isn't really within the scope of what we can do, but we can mitigate the further release.
Thank you, Andre, for that answer, and thank you to Laurentine for the question. Our next question comes from Jessica Minshew. Are children's plush toys containing plastic pellet filling considered a primary microplastic source, even though they are contained within the toys?
I can respond to this one quickly. The short answer is yes. I would think that they would still be a primary microplastic as long as the particles are under 5 millimeters, and we'd be open to receiving any information or data you have about those products.
Thank you, Alice, for that answer, and thank you, Jessica, for the question. Our next question comes from Carrie Levin, which is why were PFAS and toxic chemically laden artificial turf blades and backing eliminated from consideration of MP?
I could take that question. My name is Nicole Macatrao. I'm a senior environmental scientist here, and we have not eliminated blades and backing from consideration. We just have a focused narrow list, and at this stage in our process, we are still in the research phase and welcome additional feedback on products we should consider. So please add your comments to our CalSafer system. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, for that answer. Thank you, Carrie, for the question. Our next question comes from Melanie Gross. Oh, this is actually a comment, so we will move to the next question. Our next question comes from Cindy Sullivan. There are many polymers which are not solid and not considered microplastics. It is important to be specific regarding the definition of a microparticle versus a polymer. Not all polymers are solid. Have the definitions been set?
I can take that one. This is Dicle Yardımcı, Senior Engineer with DTSC. For our proposed definition of microplastics, we encourage you to see our Microplastics to CC list rulemaking webpage, and we are going to send the link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dicle, for that answer, and thank you, Cindy, for the question. Okay. I do see we have a hand raised, so I am going to switch over. Carrie Levin, I am going to allow you to talk. If you would like to please speak your question now.
Hi, I had my second part of the question is, what does it take to get the blades and the backing of artificial turf to be more seriously considered to the same level of the artificial turf infill? Hello?
Hi, Carrie. This
Oh,
is Andre Algazi. We actually are looking at artificial turf separately. There's a separate project underway. There's a background document on our website, and we expect to release some additional information on artificial turf early in 2026.
okay. I'm referring to the blade specifically. That can be considered at the same level as the infill. So if the blades are under research, how does that compare to the infill
Well,
level?
we had this project underway. It was already going, the turf evaluation on a separate track. So it's not that we aren't considering the blades or the backing. It's just that we have a separate project to look at them separate from this one.
Any reason why that was separated?
They started at different times.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andre, for the answer, and thank you, Carrie, for the question. Okay, I'm going to go to our next raised hand, who I believe is Deanne Wolka. I'm going to give you permission to unmute, so if you could go ahead and unmute yourself and speak your question.
Hi, Dr. Algazi, Diane Wolke, here again from Safe Healthy Playing Fields. I think we're getting mixed messages here. We are understanding that the carpet blades and backing will be considered. I'm hoping that it also includes the microplastics from the shock pads. We are acutely aware of the other effort that's going on with DTSC in regards to artificial turf. But given the fact that just the blades alone constitute 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of blades lost annually per playing field, with 1,100 acres of playing fields being added each year in California, where we want to make sure that we can do everything we can to stop this horrible product. We're also working with the California Coastal Commission. Some of us are currently double dutying with the Coastal Commission meeting going on right now. We're fighting like mad to keep these out of the coastal permit zone where they are not permitted. Synthetic turf is not, neither is pour in place used tire crumb playground surfacing. And so I just want to be clear. Can we write to the issues of the blades, the backing, the shock pads in regards to this particular microplastics plan, or
Yeah.
should all those comments be reserved for upcoming comments under synthetic turf in hopefully the end of January, is my understanding.
You are certainly welcome to comment as part of this or that or both.
Perfect.
Yeah, and
Thank you so much.
I would say kind of what Nicole was saying earlier. We're, narrowing, just out of necessity, but that doesn't mean, we're excluding anything that we've looked at previously or anything that potentially could generate or contain microplastics. So if you've got comments or information about things that you think we should consider that pertain to microplastics, please submit them as part of
Absolutely.
this comment period, and we certainly evaluate them. Appreciate it.
Thank you so very much for clarifying.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andre and Ann Cooper, for that response. And thank you, Diane or Deanne, for the question. Okay, moving along to our next question, I see from Katie Pelch in the Q&A. I see under cleaning products, detergent pods are named specifically, but other types of detergent delivery systems, including detergent sheets, use the same polymer. Will this category be broad enough to include these other systems as well, i.e., are detergent sheets in scope?
Hello, this is teacher Yardımcı again. I can take this one. So at this time, we haven't proposed any priority products yet. When we do move forward with a priority product proposal, we will refine the product definitions. And certainly, if you think we should consider other specific product types that we haven't mentioned in our background document, please let us know through the written comment period during CalSafer, and also our comment period followed up with after the Q&A session today.
Thank you, Dicle, for that response, and thank you, Katie, for the question. Our next question comes from Naomi Ondrasek. Naomi says, apologies if I missed this explanation. What was involved in the preliminary screening process? Was this primarily a literature review?
I can take this one. This is Fatima. We call it preliminary because we are at the earliest stages of the research and the prioritization process. But at each stage of the screening process or the research stage that we had, we included all of our resources, like technical information that we had, SCP's resources, the insights from subject matter experts, academia, and also the considerations that we had. So we considered all of these factors during our preliminary scoping research, not only literature review. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima, for that answer, and thank you, Naomi, for the question. I'm going to come back to our raised hands. So I see Nick Lapis, you have your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself. If you could please go ahead and unmute yourself and speak your question.
Hi, good morning. Nick Lapis with Californians Against Waste. I have a few questions, but principally I'm wondering why the personal care products and cosmetics were, not included and they were listed in Appendix A. The reason I'm asking is, they're some of the easiest to remove microplastics. They're intentionally added microplastics a lot of times without a functional use, whether it's just a cosmetic use or a abrasive use that has alternatives. It seems like some of the lowest hanging fruit for tackling microplastics, and I'm wondering why it was removed. And I have a feeling that it might have to do with the fact that there was a bill in the legislature on this, but given that the bill was not signed, it seems like it might be worth revisiting.
Thank you, Nick. I can take this comment. This is Disha Yardımcı again. We have not deprioritized them. So I think just to clarify everything that we included in Appendix A in the background document, we are still considering them. Just Fatima mentioned because of several reasons, including like our given resources, we had more time to look further into on some of the products, but that doesn't mean we are not going to revisit the ones. We did actually look at the personal care products and cosmetics as well. And thank you for that comment, for letting us know. So again, for all the attendees, please let us know if any product types we should prioritize to move forward for potential rulemaking. And if we haven't looked at any of the products that we should consider, that's not included in the background document, please let us know.
Could I sneak in a second question?
Yes, please go ahead, Nick.
My second question was about the biodegradability, usage of the term biodegradability through the document. That is a term that can be a little problematic. The California legislature has banned the use of that term on any product whatsoever. Actually, the only degradability claims you're allowed to make in California are compostability, home compostability, and I think that's actually it. But I noticed that it was sort of used somewhat interchangeably with compostable in the document. Was that intentional, or what was the reason for that?
I can take that one. Thank you, Nick. So I'm assuming you're talking about some of the alternatives we have included in the background document and in the presentation. So those are the marketing terms that we have found during our research that are claimed to be biodegradable alternatives. That's where the terminology came from. Certainly, we have not defined biodegradability for any of those products. And also, I think there was a related question I saw in the Q&A earlier. We have not done an evaluation of the safety of those alternatives. We simply included what we have found during our research that's available on the market.
Again, I would point out that anything that's labeled biodegradable cannot legally be sold in California. So I would just encourage you to maybe dig in a little bit deeper, because there are some materials that degrade, some that don't, but biodegradable is sort of a meaningless term. Thank you.
Certainly. So just to add on, when we do propose priority products, we're going to do more deeper dive into the research. So right now it's preliminary. So we will definitely look at the actual definitions and alternatives. And then once we go through, before we go through the official rulemaking, we will engage with the manufacturers of those proposed priority products. Thank you, Nick, for the comment.
But I would just ask if there is information out there about, the ability for alternatives to degrade, fully biodegrade, meet any one of these specific terms. We'd certainly welcome that information.
Thank you, Deechley, and thank you, Ann Cooper. Thank you, Nick, for the question. Okay, I'm going to return to some of our typed questions in our Q&A. So our next question comes from Laurentine Brazil. If a stainless steel cap has a plastic insert inside the cap, will SB 54 remove it, and does this application of plastic leach into the product?
I can take this one. So SB 54, although we cite it in our background document, it does fall under the authority of CalRecycle. So if you have specific questions regarding to SB 54, we recommend you check out CalRecycle's website on SB 54. I'm going to send a link in the chat. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Deechley. And thank you, Laurentine, for the question. Our next question comes from Kala Senathiraja. Is the intention to also undertake full life cycle assessments for the alternatives? If yes, what framework will be used for this?
I can take this one. My name is Alice Henderson. Again, I'm an environmental scientist, and I'm on our program's alternatives assessment support unit. And the short answer is that yes, we do require manufacturers to consider full product life cycle in their alternatives analysis reports. And I'll go ahead and put in chat the link to our alternatives analysis webpage that sounds like it might be of interest to you. We have a guidance document there that's intended to walk manufacturers through the process of completing alternatives analysis. And if you have more detailed questions about that process, please email our general inbox and we can get in touch.
Thank you, Alice, for that answer. And thank you, Kala, for the question. Okay, I did see a couple more hands come up, so I'm going to go ahead and call on them in order. I see Ed George. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and unmute and speak your question for the panelists.
Okay, thanks for taking my question. I'm just curious if when it comes to regulating the microplastics and the types of microplastics that can get into the environment, it would seem logical to understand what microplastics are currently in humans. I know there's been a lot of studies of plasma and other types, so there's a lot of different types of microplastics that can be in humans. But it would seem like you'd want to focus on the products that would tend to migrate into human beings easier, the most easiest, because there's going to be a wide variety of microplastics. And not only that, you have to consider the co-contaminants that the microplastics might take into the person, right? So chemicals get absorbed to the microplastics and they're also getting involved. So just a thought that it'd be kind of interesting to take a look at population surveys and see what microplastics, what types of microplastics are actually in people, and then that can help guide regulations. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed, for the comment. Okay, our next raised hand is Marissa Tessman. Marissa, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and unmute and speak your question for the panelists.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Marissa.
Excellent. Yeah, my question was if shoes have been considered based on the secondary microplastics that they generate. I know everybody has one or more pairs of shoes, and more often than not, the outsoles are made from EVA or PVC or polyether that are definitely in the consideration for types of persistent microplastics. So yeah, I was wondering if that was considered as part of the list of products.
Thank you. I can take this one. This is Dişle Yardımcı. As we mentioned, microplastics are everywhere, so we had to start somewhere. So we started with the initial list based on several considerations. Shoes is not something we have included in our background document, but definitely that's a great comment. We would love to hear the products you think we should look into for potentially generating microplastics. And thank you for that question, comment, Marissa.
Okay, thank you. I also put that on the Q&A, so please feel free to disregard the Q&A comment.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you, Dişle, for that answer. Okay, coming back to our typed questions, I did see a follow-up from Jessica Minshew about her question on plush toys, so we're just going to briefly revisit that. The question was, are children's plush toys containing plastic pellet filling considered a primary microplastic source, even though they are contained within the toys? Alice, if you could just briefly summarize the response you gave us. And Jessica, if you have any follow-up or need any clarification, please do let us know.
Thanks, Danielle, and thanks, Jessica, for the follow-up. And yeah, I'll just clarify that yes, those products would meet our definition of primary microplastic, even though the pellets are contained within the toy, that is a product category that we could consider.
Thank you, Alice. Okay, moving to our next question. This one is from Claire Elliott. Has DTSC investigated the use of polymeric sand in landscapes?
I can take this one as well. So this is Dişle Yardımcı. So similar to Marissa's comments question earlier on the shoes, again, we looked at a set of products just because we didn't have the resources to look at everything on the market. So this is not one of the products that was included in our background document, but certainly appreciate this comment. And if you do have, as Ankupa mentioned earlier, any information on any studies on these products, please also send them our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dişle. And thank you, Claire, for that question. Our next question comes from Kayla Robinson. Why did you decide not to focus on personal care products and cosmetics? These are intentionally added microplastics with many non-essential uses and direct environmental and health exposure. This should be a much higher priority than some of the items that have been identified.
I can take this one as well. This is Dicle Yardımcı. As we have mentioned, just to reiterate, clarify that again, we have not made any kind of prioritization yet on any of those products. We did actually look at personal care products, which is included in the appendix of our background document. The goal of this workshop and public comment period is to gather feedback from you guys to see which products we should be considering for prioritization. So that will help us in our process to look into some of these products and prioritize them moving forward. We appreciate this comment, but just to clarify again, we haven't made any kind of prioritization of any of these products at this time.
Thank you, Dicle, and thank you, Kayla. Our next question comes from Eric Nolan. I have not looked at the background document yet, so the answer may be there, but I'm curious if apparel, especially performance apparel, were considered in the review.
I can take this one as well. This is Dicle Yardımcı. We did look at textile, so that was included in the appendix. We haven't specifically looked at performance apparel, but that's something also on our radar. And thank you for that comment slash question. And if you do have any studies, any exposure information on specific product types, please send them to us using our CalSafer platform.
Thank you, Dicle, and thank you, Eric, for the question. Our next question comes from Claire Elliott. Fatima mentioned the background information includes more details on which microplastics are more hazardous based on polymer type, etc. Where can we find that information?
Can take this one. Thanks, Claire, for your question. Actually, in our background document, we investigated different product categories, and for each of those product categories, we did the research on microplastics release based on and their hazard traits based on the exposure scenarios. So we did not compare those product categories and the hazard traits of the microplastics that release from them, but you can find many details about the hazard traits and the exposure impacts based on the specific exposure scenarios for each of those product categories. I hope it would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima, for that answer. Thank you to Claire for the question. Our next question comes from Scott Mobley. The background document states that there are certain product categories that align with the statewide microplastics strategy. Does that mean that DTSC will be focusing primarily on those categories in our work?
I can take this one. This is Dicle Yardımcı. When we have, because microplastics are everywhere, they're in so many different products, we had to start somewhere with an initial list of products. And as Fatima mentioned, we considered several parameters when we narrowed down our list. Ocean Protection Council's microplastics statewide strategy is just one of the resources we have relied on forming our list. Again, to clarify, we have not prioritized any of those products that we mentioned in our background document. But if you think we should prioritize one product over another, please definitely let us know. And if you have any information on those products specifically, please send them to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dicle, and thank you to Scott for the question. Our next question comes from Katie Pelch. Also, under cleaning products, do products that are standalone fragrance beads fall into this product as they are neither detergents or fabric softeners? I believe this is a continuation of the earlier question about microplastics from detergents.
I can take this one. So you're right, like these are not neither detergents or fabric softeners, but it's still part of the cleaning products and the primary microplastics that are added to the cleaning products. So thank you so much for this comment, and we would love to hear your feedback. And if you think there is a product category that we would be better to prioritize that, please send us, I'm sorry, a written comment. So we mentioned detergents and fabric softeners as some examples of the cleaning products. So we would love to hear your feedback either here or during the public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima, and thank you, Katie, for that question. Our next question comes from Leslie Lucas. Can you expand on the research of health impacts from microplastics from turf infill? Has there been any verification that alternative infill types are in fact free of glues and microplastics?
I can take this one. This is Dicle Yardımcı. For the health impacts of microplastics from turf infill, we have included a set of references in our background document. So if you have specific questions on any of the products, we encourage you to check out the references that we listed in the references section of our background document. And for the alternatives, we simply, for any product type, including the turf infill, the alternatives we included in our background document is what is available that we have found during our research, but we have not done any kind of safety evaluation of those alternatives yet. When we do propose priority products, we will do a more deeper dive in terms of alternatives or other aspects and other information on specific product type at that time. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dicle, and thank you, Leslie. Our next question comes from Lawrence Rittman. What are your thoughts on consumer products that wear away as part of their designed function, such as shoe soles and tires? How would a product like that be addressed or replaced?
I can take this one as well. This is Dicle Yardımcı. For the alternatives and product replacements, that's something down the line we will look into further. At this time, we are in the very early stages of our process. We are simply sharing our findings on the list of products we have evaluated and gathering feedback from you guys that will help us in our prioritization process. In terms of like addressing what to do with a specific product and alternatives, those will be addressed when we propose priority product. We will release what we call a profile. That's a technical document. We'll go into specifics of those type of questions, as well as we will have a peer regulatory workshop and a comment period before we start an official rulemaking process on a specific proposed priority product at that time.
And I was just going to also add that that's also the purpose of the alternatives analysis step in our processes for manufacturers who have all the knowledge of the products to then do an assessment of possible alternative options to reduce exposure to the chemical that we're concerned about and see about feasibility and all the complications that come with various products.
Thank you, Dicle, and thank you, Ann Cooper. And thank you to Lawrence for that question. Our next question comes from Shelley Walther. Would it be possible to enable saving of transcripts for this webinar for the purpose of generating detailed meeting summaries? So we will be posting both the recording and the PowerPoint for this workshop on the Safer Consumer Products website. That will be available within 2 to 3 weeks. We did drop that link in the chat earlier for you. And the recording of this workshop will also have that closed captioning enabled. Okay, thank you for your question, Shelley. Our next question comes from Cynthia Fan. In your background document, as potential alternatives for artificial turf infill, you identified sand, wood, fiber, cork, coconut, walnuts, and olive cores. Are you able to highlight the alternative of organically managed grass since it obviates the need for artificial turf infill altogether?
I can take this one. This is Dicle Yardımcı. Again, just in regards to alternatives for turf or any product that we have talked about in the background document, We simply included what we found during our research, what is available as an alternative. So we are not promoting any of those alternatives over the others, or we have not done the safety evaluation of those alternatives. And infill specifically had so many alternatives, we couldn't simply include every single thing on there. So we included some of them. But we have included references there. So if you check those references in our background document, you can also see other alternatives we weren't able to like fit into the background document.
Thank you, DJ. Thank you, Cynthia, for the question. I do see we have a couple of hands up, so I am going to call on folks who have their hands up. First up, I see Eric Nolan. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and speak your question for the panelists, Eric.
Hi, this is Eric Nolan. Thank you very much. I'm with Stewarding Design LLC, also partner with the Evangelical Environmental Network in activities such as this. And I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for this workshop. I think this is very powerful and it's good stuff. And I think we're making a lot of progress here. I really appreciate the work that the Safer Consumer Products Group is doing overall. I think it's a very important work that's being done. My question, though, is I'm curious if there's any sort of engagement or plan to engage with industry, manufacturers, distributors on how to install some of these alternatives that we're talking about, or if you're getting pushback, or what sort of effort there is to work on that side of the space.
I can take that, Eric. We're still really, really early in the process, as we said, so we're still trying to just figure out even where we will go. But this is the beginning of a really long process, both from the research side, but also the engagement side. So, kicking this off is inviting industry manufacturers, folks to come and start talking with us. And we'll kick off that relationship now. That will last throughout the process. So really just encourage folks to let us know if you have any concerns or thoughts. And we'll continue that throughout. And there's lots of opportunities as we proceed. With every document release we have, we will have multiple additional workshops and document releases where there's additional opportunity for engagement. And then ultimately, as we said, in terms of alternatives, that alternatives evaluation is something that the manufacturers do as part of our process as well.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ann Cooper, and thank you, Eric. I'm going to go ahead and call on our next raised hand. I see Gordon Schofield. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. If you could please unmute and speak your question for the panel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you for calling on me. Thank you for the whole session so far. Just wanted to ask, I noticed that you had some focus on plastic mulch films for agriculture, and understood that you have a lot of different potential applications, but is plastic coated fertilizers a potential application that you are looking at as well?
I could take this one. Thank you so much for the question, Gordon. Plastic covered fertilizers and things of that nature, including seeds, were something that we looked at in our preliminary research. And we would encourage you, if you have additional information on that, to please comment on our background document in CalSafer. We would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gordon, for that question. Our next raised hand is Cynthia Fan. Cynthia, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and speak your question for the panel.
Hi, so I have a follow-up question. I had the question earlier about the alternatives for artificial turf infill that were listed, and I wanted to understand more. It's more of a process question. So it sounded like the answer was that if you were looking for alternatives to artificial turf infill, you might go to an artificial turf manufacturer and ask them for alternatives. But what I'm asking is, does the process that the DTSC does allow for you to promote the solution of not using artificial turf at all? For example, maybe you would go to a totally different industry, like the natural turf, grass, real grass. You'd go to seed suppliers and sod suppliers, and that, I mean, because that's an alternative that would eliminate the need for artificial turf infill altogether.
And Cooper, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to start
Yeah,
answering?
I think kind of the basis of it is that we don't really promote any specific alternative. Manufacturers have they do their alternatives analysis, they send the reports back to us. We do have the option through the regulatory response process to respond to what we see in the alternatives analysis reports and address additional environmental human impacts that we see might still be a concern through that process. But we don't necessarily actively promote one alternative over another. So I get what your question is, but just kind of through the way our process is set up.
Sure. Is it something that you would be able to identify though as an option when you write this up in your documents?
We do. So in our profiles, we do have sections for like chemical and non-chemical alternatives in our sections in our documents that we do write. So we definitely do highlight, as many alternatives as we can kind of find out there. So we can certainly list it in our documents.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Ann Cooper, and thank you, Cynthia. I am going to briefly return to our typed questions because I see our next two are also about artificial turf. They come from Leslie Lucas. So the questions are, have the plastic blades and backing from artificial turf been studied in terms of microplastics shedding? And joined to that, what are the mitigation measures being considered for rubber infill on articulated turf? I believe Andre touched on this earlier. If you could give us a kind of a summary of what you said for the previous question in this vein.
I just pasted thanks, Danielle, Andre Algazi, branch manager at Safer Consumer Products. I just pasted something in the chat, although I don't see that it went. So yeah, we did actually cite a couple of papers on what you're asking about as far as the generation of microplastics from turf in the artificial turf background document. Not our topic today, but it is on our website, and I attempted to paste the link, so hopefully it's there. But let me check. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andre. Okay. I do see Cynthia, your hand is raised. I'm not sure if this is a continuation of your previous question, but you are able to unmute yourself if you would like to ask us a follow-up. Cynthia, if you are there, we're not able to hear you at the moment. If you would
You put
like
her
to.
hand down, so she maybe has.
Thank you, Andre.
Yeah.
Okay. I do see another raised hand, so I'm going to call on Marissa Tessman to ask our next question. Marissa, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question for the panelists.
Hi, yes, thank you. I had a clarifying question regarding the end goal. I know this is very preliminary, so you might not know the answers just yet, but is the goal of gathering this information to provide regulation or bans on microplastics, or are there other incentives or other programs that can be initiated from the information gathered here? Like, for example, I know that in the US, there's only 4% of composting facilities that accept biodegradable plastics or biodegradable alternatives. And so I'm wondering if that's something that could be expanded as a result of this research.
I can jump in on this one, Marissa. So yeah, as you heard earlier in the workshop, this is the first step. So really the goal of this process right now in this document is to help us select one or more ultimately one or more products that contain or generate microplastics for regulation under our framework. And so you heard about our four-part framework that starts with the candidate chemical, and we identify a specific consumer product, require manufacturers to identify and evaluate alternatives that potentially safer, and then we would select a regulatory response. So right now you saw that we were quite early in the process. We're hoping that through this engagement, we will be able to select some specific consumer products that we might regulate under our framework. And we may come back and do more, but we're probably that's the kind of information we're seeking. That's the end game here right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Our next question comes from Ryan Simkowski. One of the categories described biodegradable plastics as a potential viable solution to the current materials used, but that these must be approved or verified by the USDA and that no such solution currently exists. How will the DTSC regulations carve out the potential continued use for biodegradable plastics?
I can take this question. Nicole Macatrao, Senior Environmental Scientist. Ryan, I'm assuming you're asking about the alternative to plastic film mulch. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture allows the use of conventional and biodegradable plastic film mulches with restrictive annotations for growing certified organic produce. However, no biodegradable plastic film mulches currently are available in the market and meet the USDA's criteria, and alternatives will be assessed for each proposed priority product. And the criteria will vary depending on the available science and other information once we propose it. So yes, you're correct. And as we move forward in the process, each assessment that we'll be making will be based on that available information. And each priority product might look a little different in terms of what might be a viable alternative.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Ryan, for that question. Due to time, we are only going to take about 3 more questions. So we are going to focus on the typed questions in the Q&A. And then we are going to switch over to public comment to ensure that folks have time to make public comments. Again, if you do have additional questions, you can reach out to us at saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. I'm going to go ahead and take our next question, which comes from Carla Garibay Garcia. When considering biodegradable alternatives, are you also taking into consideration plastic chemicals added to bio-based products when determining whether they are a safe alternative to plastic products?
I think that in doing an alternatives analysis, the manufacturer would need to identify all the relevant factors for comparison with whatever the priority product is. So if there was a non-biodegradable product that we were regulating and there were additives, I think that would come into play in the alternatives analysis. They would need to identify what those relevant factors are for the alternatives analysis so that we understand what the trade-offs might be.
Thank you, Andre. And just to clarify, we are not claiming any of those alternatives we listed as like biodegradable alternatives in our background document. That's just simply the marketing term like folks use that came across during our research. So we have included what is available as an alternative in the market. As Andre mentioned, when we do propose priority products, we're going to work with the manufacturers to find the right terminology, what is available, what is safer and viable alternative to that specific that's specific to the proposed priority product. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Andre and Tichle, for that response. Thank you to Carla for the question. Our next question comes from Achieve Environmental. Does DTSC coordinate with other delegated authorities when identifying and evaluating candidate chemicals? For example, as DTSC researches and develops the CC list, Are those same chemicals also evaluated by air quality, wastewater, etc. permitting agencies?
I can start off on this one. The quick answer is that we do coordinate closely with other authorities. While DTSC has the authority to propose additions to our candidate chemicals list, the baseline for that candidate chemicals list is actually based on a wide range of other lists from other authoritative bodies. I think I mentioned the California Department of Health and the U.S. Center for Disease Prevention and Control, but I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat to the section of our regulations that lists all of the authoritative bodies that our candidate chemicals list is based on. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, for that response, and thank you to Achieve Environmental for that question. Okay, I believe we can do one more question before we switch to public comment. So the next one comes from Leanne McAuliffe. Are personal care products, specifically feminine care products that contain microplastics, something that comes under DTSC's purview, or should concerns about these products be directed somewhere else?
Those fall under our purview, so yeah, you can send them our way.
Thank you, Ann Cooper, for the response, and thank you to Leanne for the question. Okay, due to the time and the large number of questions we received, we do apologize we're not able to address all of them right now. So that will be our final question for now. We are going to switch over to public comment to ensure that folks have time to make comments. I am going to peruse the Q&A because I did see some comments come in earlier. Okay. So just as a friendly reminder, the public comment period is active right now, and the deadline to provide comments is 11:59 p.m. on January 30th, 2026. And so you can submit public comments right now or through the CalSafer website. We are going to do the public comment period now, similar to the Q&A. So you can click on the Q&A button at the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and submit your comment. Or you can, of course, raise your hand and we will call on you to unmute yourself by pressing *6. Sorry, those are for the folks who have joined us by phone. For those who have joined by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, or when we call on you to unmute yourself, you can press *6. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So the first public comments we receive. The first one is from Sarah Palmer, who says plastics are also killing pollinators like bees that are necessary for food production. Thank you, Sarah, for that comment. Our next comment comes from Melanie Gross, who says the EU restriction on synthetic polymer microparticles includes many product types in its scope, including paint. Thank you, Melanie, for that comment. I see another comment from Terry Saucier, who says plastic is not biodegradable. Thank you, Terry, for that comment. I also see a comment from Laurentine Brazil, which says, please include synthetic clothing as a primary microplastic source. Thank you, Laurentine, for that comment. Okay, I see a comment from Deanne Wolk. Wood and walnut infills have tested positive for PFAS. Many alternative infills are resin coated or have plastic resin incorporated throughout. Alternative infills are a gimmick to make you look away from the sins of the carpet. Ban the carpet and no infill required. Unfortunately, the latest version of the carpet does not use infill, but has 16 times more blades. Thank you, Tian, for that comment. Okay, our next comment comes from Thomas Hawks. As others have mentioned, research appears to be pointing that textiles and apparel play a large role in the release of microplastics. One example being elevated levels of microplastics in the highest source of the Hudson River, strongly suggesting that foot traffic from hikers and the clothing and gear they carry are responsible rather than airborne deposition. Thank you to Thomas for that comment. Okay, those are all of our typed comments, so I am going to now switch to raised hands. I do see a number of folks with their hands raised. First off, we have Andrea Ventura. Andrea, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. If you could please unmute and then speak your comment.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Andrea, thank you.
Great. Thank you. My name is Andrea Ventura. I am the Legislative and Policy Director for Clean Water Action. I'm not going to make a comment today on what I think we should prioritize. I think there's a lot to think about here. Thank you for this opportunity. I have some small comments based on the document you shared that we will put in writing. I just want to bring up two issues. One was as I was reading, and I know you're in the thinking, let's collect the information stage. I do understand that, but that you do look at what alternatives are out there. And I think what you've heard is sometimes these alternatives may sound good, but they may not be perfect. Like we just heard about the resins on the natural substances in turf. However, one of the things I do want to urge the department to think about is as you are prioritizing, sometimes don't go for the places where there are viable alternatives that would meet environmental and health expectations. Go for the things where the innovation is needed, and we need to drive the companies to do that. That's really what this program was meant to help promote, and we would urge you to think in those terms. The other thing I wanted to bring up was I really appreciated the discussion of aquatic life impacts and aquatic ecology, because the aquatic environment, whether it ends up in your drinking water or in fish that people are eating, particularly subsistence fishers who are usually from or often from low income communities of color, the aquatic environment is actually a primary exposure source for humans and plastics. This is why, as you know, the State Water Board is having to examine microplastics and measuring that in our waters and particularly in drinking water. This is going to be an issue moving forward. And that's why, so I do want to bring up the issue of solubility and biodegradability. Again, I understand you're collecting information, want to know what people are saying, but we truly do reject that we could accept alternatives of plastics that are labeled. The the terminology aside, the concept is a poor one. Um, First of all, as has been stated, when these things dissolve in the aquatic environment or biodegrade, we don't know what they're degrading into, what kind of toxic chemicals are being released. But also, you've talked a lot about what gets into the aquatic environment and gets into fish and other wildlife and ecosystems that can affect water quality. There isn't a timing on this. If this material gets through a wastewater system, okay, it is in the environment, and whether it's there for one day or a year, that is still something that can affect the viability of the ecosystem and the water quality. So unless you can figure out how to a standard that means that these things are breaking down into benign components, and plastics are all very different, unless they're breaking down into benign components within the pipe system, the issue of solubility and biodegradability is really a non-starter for us on that level. So I just want to.
Andrea, I'm so sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
that's okay. I'm done.
okay, because we do have a large number of people with us today,
Go,
we are
go
keeping
ahead.
public comments to about 3 minutes each. So
All righty.
my sincerest apologies for having to interrupt you. I would like us to move along because we do have about 8 more people with their hands raised. So Andrea, thank you for that public comment. Okay. Our next raised hand is Katie Pelch. So Katie, I'm going to allow you to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute and speak your comment.
Hi, yes. I'm Dr. Katie Pelch. I'm a senior scientist on the toxics team at the Natural Resources Defense Council. And I would like to echo the comments that we just heard from my colleague Andrea at Clean Water Action. We strongly support DTSC and listing microplastics on the contaminant candidate list, and we're excited that the agency is moving forward on considering which products contain or shed microplastics to designate as priority products under the Safer Consumer Products Program. As we heard, microplastics are ubiquitous, persistent, and mobile in the environment, which means that there are increased opportunities for human exposure to microplastics to occur. And we already have evidence that widespread exposures is occurring through inhalation, ingestion, hand-to-mouth contact, and via dermal exposures. And this is evidenced by the many studies that have already found microplastics throughout the human bodies, including in the brain, heart, and reproductive organs. So we have several comments to make today, and we're going to be following up with more detailed written comments, but just kind of off the top. In Table 1 of the background document, potential alternatives are listed for various products. And although we recognize that this is a list of potential alternatives and it's not exhaustive, we wanted to highlight that there are several product categories DTSC should consider, whether, she can really take a step back and even consider if the use is necessary at all. For example, natural grass, as we've heard in the question session earlier, is an alternative for turf. So we would make the case that artificial turf is not necessary, given that there are many alternatives. Likewise, things like detergent pods are not necessary. So just encourage DTSC to consider this question of necessity as it moves forward in the process of picking priority products. And then in terms of products to consider, we also just wanted to note the availability in the marketplace of things like 3D printers and 3D printing pens as another kind of children's toy that does involve primary microplastics. So I want to put that kind of on your radar as well. We're also confused about one of the questions that was included in the background document regarding single-use plastic tea bags. In the document, DTSC asks whether there are functional advantages of plastic tea bags over cotton or paper tea bags. And this was a really odd question to us, and it didn't seem to be in alignment with the nature of the questions that were asked for the other sections. And I would just suggest that the question should focus instead on the availability of alternatives, of which there are already many, including loose tea. DTSC also asks in the background document whether there are efforts underway to replace polystyrene foam foodware with non-plastic alternatives. And we just like to note that there are already several local jurisdictions in California that have banned polystyrene foodware. And the organization Californians Against Waste has a list available of those ordinances on its website. Let's see.
Katie.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are at 3 minutes, so I am going to ask, thank you so much for understanding. We are going to move on to our next commenter. So thank you, Katie, for that comment. I see our next raised hand comes from Alex Truelove. Alex, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and unmute and speak your comment.
Thanks, Danielle. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Alex.
Great. Okay, Alex Truelove, Senior Policy Manager for the Biodegradable Products Institute, or BPI. Thanks for the opportunity to comment today. I wanted to attempt to expand on some previous questions and comments specifically around the use of the term biodegradable as it relates to California law, and maybe provide some clarity or thoughts for this project moving forward. Others have said, well, biodegradability is a measurable attribute. There is a law in California, Assembly Bill 1201, that prohibits the use of the naked term biodegradable to describe a specific product, like a tea bag, to call back to earlier. There are exceptions for specific products like soil biodegradable mulch film, but to get behind the reasoning of this and why the law was enacted, it's because the word biodegradable doesn't itself indicate a specific environment, a specific time frame, testing criteria, or a standard, and therefore can be misleading. Biodegradable where? How long will it take? Says who? What's the testing methodology? And perhaps most importantly, where should I, as a consumer, put the product when I'm done with it? What's the intended end of life? And that's why, conversely, the term compostable, as others mentioned, is allowed because it's strictly defined. It does indicate each of those parameters, and those are each required to be independently certified. We often say that the word compostable could translate to biodegradable in compost, but that qualifier in compost or soil to describe soil biodegradable mulch film is the key there. I do want to say, though, this is not to say that certified compostable products won't biodegrade in other environments. In fact, studies show that they will. But rather, when alternatives are being described, tea bag, whatever it might be, I just think it's going to be important moving forward to separate product design and claims that need to be understood separately from the underlying chemistry that can separate a fundamentally persistent product or material from a non-persistent, especially in the world of plastics. So for me, it's the difference between the word compostable describing a product's behavior in a specific instance in which it's designed to be, and the standards behind the requirements, for example, for compostable products that indicate the ability for that material to biodegrade in a whole suite of environments. Like there's a whole, I think, world of possibility and potential to be explored there. And I think that sort of latter idea warrants a lot more exploration and defining, especially within microplastics. What are these products doing if they don't end up where they're meant to be, if that makes sense. So thanks for the opportunity and look forward to hearing more.
Thank you for the comment, Alex. I see our next raised hand is Claire Elliott. Claire, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and unmute and speak your comment.
Yes, hi. I have a few comments. The main thing is to add some details to the plastic blade question for the turf, artificial turf. I saw that we might have an opportunity to share our screen. I have some images of plastic blades, and I can email them in, but they were running off of a field in Palo Alto, a little pathway of them going across into a storm drain. And so I will share those pictures by email. I also was concerned when they installed a dog park and a children's playground with the artificial turf in our neighborhood that the EnviroFill plastic coated sand grains was already escaping, probably partly from the installation process. I found grains across the path, and I found a lot of plastic blades that had been trimmed, mixed in with mulch in the landscaping. So I will send those images and facts in, but I'm also concerned, and I mentioned it in the questions, about the polymeric sand, because polymers are being added to the landscape that way. And washing, you can look at any number of fora on landscaping practices, and people complain that it runs off anyway, and so you have to refill it. Well, where is it going? It's going into storm drains, and sometimes they use PVC as a polymer, so we know that one's particularly harmful. But I also am concerned, thinking about the tea bags. The city of Palo Alto asks us to put our milk cartons and other plastic coated cartons into the compost, and those are all plastic lined, and that compost is getting used in field applications. So I'm very concerned about allowing plastic lined cardboard to be composted. So I just wanted to throw that one out there as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Claire, for the comment. I see we do have more hands raised, but I would like to briefly come to our typed out comments to read a few of them. So those of you with your hand raised, I will come back to you. Our next comment comes from Terry Saucier, who says, need to include the 1,000 and 1,000 of pound plastic blades, backing, and shock pad. Thank you for that comment, Terry. Okay, I am looking for more comments. I do see a comment from Carla Garibray Garcia, who says, thank you for the presentation and well-organized workshop. We at Monterey Bay Aquarium really appreciate DTSC doing this workshop. Our team has been advocating at the Global Plastic Treaty around chemicals of concern, and we have also been deeply engaged in the implementation of SB 54 here in California. We remain concerned about biodegradability, marketing claims, and the plastic chemicals used in bio-based plastics. We strongly encourage DTSC to do additional research into the biodegradable claims and will follow up via written comment with resources. Thank you, Carla, for that comment. Our next comment is from Catherine O'Shea, who says, "Good morning. There are a few standards that exist to assess the biodegradation and toxicity of plastics in various environments, including ASTM 6400 and OECD 208. Thank you, Catherine, for that comment. Our next comment is from Jessica Minshew, who says, "When considering the shedding of fibers from polyester, the impact of alternatives need to be considered. Globally, cotton farming requires significant chemical fertilization and pest management that creates ocean dead zones. Then cotton also requires flame retardants to meet certain flammability safety requirements. Wool, which can naturally meet flammability requirements, requires significant amounts of livestock land and management in addition to increased risk of animal abuse issues. These are only two examples of polyester alternatives which could have significant negative unintended consequences." Thank you, Jessica, for that comment. Our next comment is from Jackie Nunez. "A good resource to check out. There is a link to upscorecard.org. The UP Scorecard is a science-based online tool to help users select foodware and food packaging that is safe and environmentally sustainable. The UP Scorecard measures commonly used foodware and food packaging materials with a single yardstick to offer the first ever free and comprehensive tool for making sustainable purchasing decisions for these products based on the latest available science." Thank you, Jackie, for that comment. Okay, our next comment from Terry Saucier. "Thank you for your ongoing work on artificial turf, and thank you for looking at the loss of infills at this time. However, a major source of plastic is from the glass blades, backing, and shock pad. A regulation-sized playing field contributes 2,000 to 3,000 pounds microplastics per field per year. The new version of artificial turf has 16 times the blades that can be shed and pollute the environment. 12 to 15% microplastics in waterways is from artificial grass blades. Therefore, the entire product needs to be incorporated in this report. Thank you." Thank you, Terry, for that comment. And our next comment from Catherine O'Shea. "ASTM D5271 is another standard which aims to assess the biodegradation of plastics in aerobic activated sludge wastewater systems. These standards may not factor in all variables in these complex systems, but they are great starting points for research and test methods. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for that comment. I'm now going to return to our raised hands. I do see our next raised hand is John Norman. John, I'm going to allow you to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute and speak your comment.
Hi, thank you and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is John Norman, a toxicology and senior director at the American Chemistry Council. We appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of a future science-based process on the topic of microplastics and to comment on the Microplastic in Consumer Product Research Report. For more than 5 years, ACC has funded independent micro and nanoplastic research, and together with the International Council of Chemical Associations, we also launched the Microplastic Advanced Research and Innovation Initiative, or MARI, to bring together scientists from academia, government, and industry to improve global understanding of microplastics. As DTSC considers next steps, we do want to emphasize that microplastics do not meet the definition of a chemical under the California statute and should not be listed under the California Safer Consumer Product Regulation as a product chemical combination. Consistent with the World Health Organization, micro and nanoplastics are a heterogeneous mixture of solid particles with different sizes, shapes, polymer types, surface chemistries, and associated chemicals, and are not a single chemical entity. Regardless of any future regulatory effort, we encourage DTSC to use a clear and narrow definition of microplastics so manufacturers and other stakeholders can understand exactly what materials may be subject to funeral actions. Having clarity up front will help avoid unintended consequences and ensure consistent implementation across sectors. We also want to highlight a significant challenge. The current state of the scientific literature does not provide the level of reliability needed to calculate an alternatives analysis threshold or allow a credible, publicly available, or manufacturer-led alternatives analysis to be conducted as required underneath the Safer Consumer Products Program. This is not the conclusion of industry alone. Multiple authoritative bodies, including the World Health Organization, the US FDA, the European Food Safety Authority, and Germany's Federal Institute for Risk Assessment, have all noted substantial limitations in the hazard and exposure data for microplastics. Furthermore, a recent study by researchers from the San Francisco Estuary Institute, the California State Water Board, Tox Strategies, the University of Gothenburg, and others found that less than half of ecotoxicity studies met key criteria for use and risk assessment, and that study quality has not improved over time. Before moving towards priority product designations or requesting additional information, we strongly encourage DTSC to establish clear criteria for reliability and study quality in order to evaluate whether the evidence base is sufficient to meet statutory requirements. Thank you again for hosting this discussion and for all the work that went into this report. We look forward to submitting written comments and to continue engagement as the science evolves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John, for that comment. I see our next raised hand is Brennan Giorgiani. Brennan, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself. Please unmute and speak your comment.
Hello, thank you very much. Brennan Giorgiani from the American Cleaning Institute. We're a national trade association representing household and institutional cleaning product manufacturers, as well as their ingredient suppliers. We appreciate the department hosting this workshop. As a science-based organization representing some of the products that were touched upon today, we're very interested in addressing the topics in the background document, but even more so making sure that the products that Californians use every day are safe for them and the environment. Our industry is keenly aware of the ingredients that we use to manufacture our products, and we strive to ensure that consumers even know this information as well. And this is exemplified by the information that is listed on cleaning product packaging, as well as information that our members and ourselves post on our websites. And I'll also note that ACI is a proud recipient of the EPA Safer Choice Partner of the Year Award, which goes towards organizations that design, manufacture, and promote the selection and use of products with safer chemicals. So we're in line with the goals here. But on the topic of microplastics, we're going to respond with some more information, but a few of our recommendations are continuing to request that DTSC adopts a definition of microplastics that's specifically tailored to those that are contributing to the plastic pollution problem or exhibiting hazardous traits, that the focus is on primary, that's intentionally added microplastics, where responsible entities can do more to address those concerns, particularly while, Cal Recycle is implementing SB 54, which will intrinsically address secondary microplastics. And I know we've touched upon it today, but it really is important to recognize work that's already been done in this space towards moving towards soluble and biodegradable alternatives with proven and widely accepted test methods. So we do believe it's imperative that we address these polymers that are most prolific and problematic. As an industry responsible for products that are designed to go down the drain, we pay the utmost attention to their end-of-life management and environmental fate. So we do look forward to submitting more substantial written comments next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brennan, for the comment. Our next raised hand is Nancy Burmeyer. Nancy, I'm going to allow you to unmute. Please unmute and speak your comment.
Great, thank you very much. Nancy Burmeyer, breast cancer prevention partner. We're a science-based organization working to reduce exposure to chemicals linked to an increased risk of breast cancer. I want to start by thanking the program, as many others have, for the great work that you do across the board and for this particular workshop. And I think the interest and the scope of products that you screened show just how huge a problem this issue is. And you have lots and lots of good options in terms of potential products to choose from. I would encourage you to continue to include cosmetics as your screening process moves forward. It may be that there are alternatives out there, but it would be good to know that and to have that included in the analysis. And as part of the decisions that you make around which product categories or which products to pursue, it would be really helpful to note, are microplastics necessary, as Dr. Pelch mentioned, and also to note where there are alternatives already available for specific functions. Being clear about that would help us as advocates look for other avenues to pursue if, in fact, the particular expertise and focus of the Safer Consumer Products Program is not necessary because there are already safer alternatives on the market. I would also say I'm looking forward to hearing the answer to the questions you asked of industry about whether or not they will conform to the EU regulations in North America. So I'm hoping you will get a good answer to that because we are anxious to hear that answer as well. So thank you very much for all that you do, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment, Nancy. Our next raised hand is Daniel Chia. Daniel, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Please unmute and speak your comment.
Thank you so much. My name is Dan Chaw, representing the Personal Care Products Council. Greatly appreciate the very hard work of staff in coming to this point to date, and we look forward to continuing engaging as this process continues. My question pertains to more kind of process related or methodology related, like how, other than the reference to the State Water Board's, or excuse me, Ocean Protection Council statewide microplastic strategy, and some of the citations in the background document, did you conduct a survey of existing literature regarding the largest contributors or biggest sources of microplastics? What was the methodology to arrive at basically the list or the background document that we have before us today? I know you mentioned it doesn't necessarily constitute a prioritization, but how does the public, how should we wrap our heads around, you'll obviously have to prioritize at a certain point in your regulatory process. So what is the rubric or criteria by which you all are thinking of prioritization? Lots of questions embedded in that, but I think you hopefully get my drift.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to apologize because we are a little short on time today. So in the interests of getting through our last public comments, if you could please follow up with us via email, we can definitely get those questions answered for you. So our email is saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov, and we are going to drop that into the chat. So again, I do apologize. We only have a few minutes left in our workshop today, so I'm going to move us forward to our final person with their hand raised for public comment. So thank you for the question, Dan. Okay. Leanne McCulphy, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute. Please unmute and go ahead and speak your comment, and this will be our final comment for the workshop today.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Leanne. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would like to urge you to include feminine care products in your assessments. As a consumer and a mother of teenage girls, I was mortified to find out that tampons marketed as 100% cotton core included polyester in their ingredients. Similarly, diapers have high plastic content, And in an era where cancers are increasing and fertility and sperm count and sperm quality are reducing, surely we have to consider all the venues that micro and nanoplastics have to enter our bodies, especially vulnerable babies, infants, and teens that are still developing. As a consumer, I also urge you to regulate artificial turf. It's not regulated at all in California, and we need you to regulate it in order to protect our kids and all those that are exposed to everything that it releases. I would urge you to employ the precautionary principle, and there is scientific doubt when it comes to microplastics in personal care products and artificial turf. I urge you to err on the side of caution and protect those that use it. And just to end, this feels like it's all a little bit about face. I am concerned that these products even get to market before they're assessed for safety. So I don't know if it's within your power to assess these products before they even get to market in future. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this situation where we were having to reverse and try and undo damage that is potentially undoable. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Leanne. So this is our final comment for the workshop. Due to time and the large number of comments we received, we do apologize we weren't able to get to all of them. And I do want to acknowledge that we did receive the additional comments that were typed out in the chat. So I wanted to confirm we received those. This does conclude our public comment session. And again, we want to thank everyone for staying engaged and submitting your questions and comments. I'm now going to hand things over to Robin Christensen, who is going to give closing remarks.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you everyone for your robust participation today. I deeply appreciate your engagement with us on this issue. And again, as you reflect on the information that we've shared today and as you review our background document, I strongly encourage you to submit formal comments. We are requesting information on exposure data, which includes the potential for products to shed, release, or break down into microplastics, and adverse impact data, the potential for microplastic exposure to cause harm to humans or to the environment. The background document also provides a series of specific requests for each of the products that we talked about today, so your input by the end of January is greatly appreciated. Speaking of appreciation, I would like to acknowledge and express my gratitude to all of our staff who've worked on this project. I also want to thank Alice, Jemiah, and Fatima for their presentations today, and to the entire Microplastics team for their hard and continued work and their commitment to advancing this important issue. And thank you to Danielle for your facilitation today. And to our audience, thank you in advance for your time and your contributions to our research process. We look forward to reading your comments.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you to our panelists and our audience. We appreciate you staying engaged during this workshop. Have a wonderful rest of your day.